Okay, so my name is Richard West. I'm a woodturner here at Studio West in Connemara, uh, part of the West family, son of Mo, uh, brother of Catherine, father of Manon, so kind of in the middle. Um, Myself and Manon work here full time doing art, selling art. I make all my work in the workshop just next door. Manon does a little bit of painting here and all over, and we try and have a little business out of that. So it's a fun kind of enterprise. Grew up in Dublin, but spent a lot of time here. So there was also a strong connection to this place. Then, when I finished art college, I was making a short film and was just across the road in the pub there. I met a French woman, spent 10 years in France, founded a family, and ended up moving back here about 25 years ago. So we've done all sorts of different jobs, um, but always involved in making things and doing things. So about 8 years ago, I sold my business. I had an oyster farm. I sold that and went back to making things full time. And so this now has been the latest iteration of that journey. Um, Nice. Oyster farming is quite hard work, and there are ups and downs as with any business. Um, just felt I really wanted to get back to making things. I kind of missed it a lot, and I enjoyed the idea of making things with my hands. I enjoyed the idea of finding value in a product that kind of would otherwise just be wasted. So all my work is just made out of recovered trees. The bits and pieces that I find or people give me, or sometimes a whole tree comes down and people say you can have it, and I make whatever I can out of it. So my whole ethos is trying to find value in something that otherwise might be missed. Um, to that end, a lot of my work is based on using interesting ideas and patterns like the gilding. I do a lot of gilding on the insides of pieces. One particular customer said it was a throwback to oyster farming because the insides of the oysters have mother of pearl on them. I don't know if that's true, but maybe there's something there. Um, but for me, it is very much about a voyage of discovery. If somebody kindly gives me a tree that's blown down, each tree and each species of wood is different. So you start off with a piece of tree and you make a few pieces and you learn as you make them about the intricacies of that particular piece of wood, the characteristics of it, how you can bring value to it. Sometimes it might be from one way or another way. Some piece of wood colored beautifully, and you might kind of go down that road, and each piece leads to the next, and you get a better feeling for it, and the pieces get more and more intricate and interesting. But then, unfortunately, you run out of tree. So a dyed monkey puzzle piece. It has a lovely kind of grain pattern to it. This is a chestnut piece, but my daughter has etched in motifs and islands from the Old British Amity chart with all the depths of the water around it. That was done for a show that we did together. This is a piece of cherry using the Japanese idea of kintsugi. So it was a very cracked piece of wood, but it's all filled with aluminium. This one here is a very warped piece of beech that I turned wet, let it warp, and finished with a limed wax. So I like this kind of translucency kind of idea to it. This one here is chestnut, and the idea is the interior is done with a Japanese coloured silver leaf. I was trying to mimic a bit the idea of the bays and creeks around here in the springtime where they go that beautiful aquamarine colour. And this one here is alder. This big alder round form, and the inside is gilded with copper. I just love the way it just picks up all the light inside. Influenced by, there's a lovely German woodturner called Ernst Glamperl, who said that when you're working with wood, and I work with all wet wood, so wood is freshly cut. So when you turn it, you know it's going to move, it's going to warp, it's going to change. So he said, you should always make it a conversation, always leave space for the wood to say something back. And he said, and especially try not to let it become an argument. So I kind of like that idea. All my pieces, I wouldn't say I have 100% ownership on them. They do what they do as well, and so I have to adapt to that. So sometimes that works well, and a piece can warp and move, and it can look very beautiful. Sometimes they can crack and split, and you can't do anything with them. But that's part of it, you know. So I kind of feel it's a nice way to do it.
Consideration?
No, I chose wood because my mother, when I was very small, uh, found an interesting way of using childcare to her advantage. She worked in the Navy School of Art and Design at the time, and she used to teach some night classes in there. And when I was about 8, instead of leaving me with the babysitter, she would bring me there, and she signed me up for the wood carving class when I was about 8. So she would leave me into wood carving, then she would go and teach her class, and then she'd come back and pick me up afterwards. So that was quite nice. But I learned a lot. But similarly, when I was much smaller, when I was, gosh, probably about 7, um, I would do pottery every Saturday with my sister, and that's become my sister's career. For me, I like pottery, but I moved into wood, and I enjoy doing that. But it's more the mindset of making things, of exploring, of questioning things, of wondering, well, why can't you do it this way? Why can't you do it that way? What would happen if I do this? What would happen if I do that? So that's something that we were very much brought up with, the idea to question things, to try a different way of doing things, to look at things differently. And I think that's very much an evidence through the work of everybody in the family. This idea of, well, if somebody does it this way, why can't I do it a different way? Why can't I see that from a different point of view? Why can't I make this object into a nicer object by bringing something to it, by exploring it a little bit more in an interesting way? So that's something that would have been very evident growing up.
Yeah, I've been.
To a degree, yeah. He was very interested in music, mainly opera. So I mean that has a dramatic flair to it. My mother and father actually met at the Edinburgh Opera Festival. That's where they met. So they met through a kind of I suppose, a cultural moment. And he was always very interested in that. But he was always very supportive. He liked the arts. He enjoyed painting. He enjoyed all those things. His father was an avid painter. He was what they called at the time a copyist, which would have been, I suppose, a fortune by today's standards. He recopied old masters, and that was his passion. So yeah, it's always been something that's always been present. Uh, when you grow up in a family like that, you don't. It's not something you see straight away. But because you're always around things like that, a lot of my friends when I was very small would have been children of other artists, and so it's something that you consider completely normal. When most people look at their career options, they might consider, and to a degree, whatever their father has done or mother has done, what's in the family. Doctors, children tend to become doctors or whatever. So in our family, going into the arts wasn't really considered anything unusual, whereas in a lot of families it would have been. So for our family, when I decided I wanted to apply for art college, it wasn't a big shock to anybody. So, because wood absorbs dye by the end grain, uh, that's the dark bit. And what I've been trying to do is exploit that whole kind of system by using a water-based dye, and then I pre-wet the wood so that the non-absorbent areas are even less absorbent. And then I put a dye on it, and then I wash back certain areas, and you get these natural highlights throughout the wood. And I find that quite interesting to play around with. So that's my experimental work on chestnut at the moment. I've been doing a few pieces like that. Um, it's lovely to wake up to beautiful surrounding, to beautiful light in the summertime, to the cold and dark in the winter. But we do two things. We make things and we have an artistic journey, but we run a small business. So you have to come here in the morning and open the shop. You have to clean up a bit. You have to have the products made. You have to do emails. You have to contact people. You have to chase up clients, things like that. and then you have to kind of switch over. As I said, my studio is just part of the shop. So one moment I'm on the lathe working away on a piece covered in shavings and sawdust. The next moment someone comes into the shop, you have to brush yourself off, come in and switch personalities into somebody who's trying to sell a product. I mean, let's be honest about it. You're trying to show the best part of what it is you've done, and deal with somebody and answer their questions. And then when they leave, you have to go back to making again. So it's quite an interesting kind of thing to do. Um, it's a nice lifestyle. The interesting bit is the journey to get there, as opposed to when you get there. So what's interesting is if you try a new technique, if you try an experiment that works out well, if you use some new equipment or new tools to try a different way of doing things, and you find something interesting in that, and you feel like you've moved things forward by doing it, that's the enjoyable part. The finished piece is almost sometimes a byproduct of that. So you get a finished piece. Obviously, you're trying to make something nice, and you do that. But no sooner have you finished one piece, you're always on to the next. And because of the way I work, I'm always working on, maybe 20 different pieces at the same time. So there are some pieces that'll be done to a certain point. Then I kind of get a little bit stuck. I'm not too sure where it's going. Instead of forcing that, I tend to put them to one side and just start a new piece. And I continually do that. But then you might come back to them a week later, but you might come back to them a year later and say, "Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember where I was going with that." And you have new ideas, and you can finish it off or whatever. You can find where you think it should go after that. So that's always very enjoyable as well, you know. And then sometimes you do a piece and you get a bit fed up with it, and you put it away. And when you rediscover it, you think, "Oh gosh, you know, why didn't I finish that? You know, that's actually really interesting." So, you know, it's nice. I think and I think through the end of COVID, probably I became more aware of it because people talked about it. But there is a thing about wood turning, and I believe in pottery as well, and a few other things where you're working in the moment. There's nothing before and after. It's just that moment that's important, and you're functioning, doing something without sometimes being quite being aware of what exactly it is you're doing, and that's a kind of a nice thing. It is the same as meditation or mindfulness. It's very similar. Um, like I said, the hardest part of that then in the situation I have here is because it's a shop and people come in, you have to stop, deal with them, and then go back to what you're doing. And that's I think the hardest part of what I do at the moment. I find that quite difficult. Really, I would be quite a self-contained person. I'm interested in my work. I'm quite happy just sitting working away, making stuff here or sometimes at home. I do all the big work here, but sometimes at home down in the studio, I'll do some of the gilding and things like that, and that's very pleasant in the evening times. I enjoy that a lot. And then you're often doing a little bit of research as well, looking at other ideas, trying to find out other ways of doing things. And then I'd be active as well within a wood turning group that we have up in Westport. So I go up there once a month and we kind of discuss things there. So that's quite nice as well.
And do you look far beyond the piece you're working on, or do you keep thinking, "Well, I'm going to do this next year," or
Not so much that, but it gives a kind of a different feel to that, and it finishes beautifully.
Yeah.
But because I work with wood, you're always going to get things like there's a little crack through that, but that's okay. That's kind of part of
Yeah.
the way it works, So it's fun to kind of work with the natural edge of the wood and the bark and the patterns it makes. So fun. As I said, when you get a big load of wood, so for instance, just recently I was given a big chestnut tree, so I made maybe a dozen pieces out of it so far, and I've really enjoyed experimenting different techniques with that, and so I'm quite excited about the bits that are going to come next. So there's a lot of anticipation there. Well, let's try this, let's try that. There's lots of interesting bits I can do with it. But I know I'll use up all the wood eventually, and then you have to go on to the next thing. So I find that very enjoyable. Well, as I said to my sister, we're still working through the trauma. So yeah, maybe growing up like that, yeah, the fact my sister does sculpture and I do kind of sculptural objects, maybe that's got something to do with it. It's very hard to analyze these things, but certainly, yeah, the idea of I suppose taking great pleasure out of making things, and the excitement of that has always been very evident, and the idea that 9 to 5 isn't as important as making nice things. And that's always been quite evident in our lives. We've always kind of like lived like that. So myself, I always, in what I do now, it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's more, when I'm interested in something, I got to work hard at it, and then hopefully that'll come to something nice, and then you start something else afterwards. So that's it's a different way of seeing things. I think like that. My mother always was, although she did have a full-time job, she would always be working on things or have ideas about things and chatting about things, and there was always a project into the future. There was always a show that was going to happen, or an exhibition, or there was going to be some kind of a project. So I like that idea of striving towards something, even though it's the striving that's important, not actually getting there. I think that's quite nice. Sometimes they're scorched to pieces. Like I said, you're always looking for what's interesting. So all trees have different characteristics. Some one thing works well, some another thing works well. So you're always looking to try, what happens if I do this? And although it works on one species of wood, it might not work on the other, or might work differently. And then so that's it's like I said, it's always a kind of an experimental journey. It's always a kind of a looking for what's interesting, what catches your imagination, and that always leads on to something else. And that's the most enjoyable part of it, really. And then this here is a bowl from ash. The outside is textured and scorched a bit, and then the inside is scorched very heavily to give it a kind of a ridged and textured feel to it. This is a textured ash foam, looking at the idea of the way the wood has summer and winter growth and how that can be exploited through that. Then these pieces here, this is a lovely bit of elm with a gilded marble leaf inside. This way. This is elm as well. It's an elm bowl, and it just has a little bit of brass worked into it there as well. This one is pine, textured, scorched, and then dyed. It's kind of fun, that one. This one is alder, done a different way from the other one. I turned end grain to exploit the spalting in it. This one here is ash. It's ash, but the center of the tree was quite rotten, so I filled it all with copper. I like that kind of combination of metal and wood. This piece here is dyed chestnut. So the chestnut, when you dye it, you can get these lovely highlights, these natural highlights, and then the inside is gilded with what's called a variegated leaf. It's a patterned leaf.